The ICU at night did not sleep. It hovered. Monitors pulsed in steady rhythms, green and amber lines tracing the difference between holding and failing. Ventilators whispered. 4 pumps clicked with mechanical patience. The lights were dim to a level meant to suggest calm without ever allowing rest. The junior nurse moved through it quietly. Her badge placed her low on the board. Newer rotation, night shift, no specialty designation highlighted. Her scrubs were plain. No pins, no extra color. Hair secured tight enough to stay forgotten through 12 hours. She checked bed 7 without breaking stride. Oxygen saturation stable, vent settings unchanged, sedation within range. She adjusted a blanket that had slipped, not because it mattered clinically, but because exposed skin invited complications later. She charted with concise entries. No excess language, no narrative. At the central station, a senior nurse spoke in a low, irritated voice to a resident. "If family shows up again, call security earlier this time." The resident nodded without conviction. The junior nurse did not look up. She listened anyway. Visitors had been pushing boundaries all evening, not loud enough to justify removal, not calm enough to ignore. Questions edged with accusation, phones always in hand, cameras angled just off obvious. She had noticed the pattern 3 hours earlier. She did not say anything then. Authority in an ICU was not assigned by awareness. It was assigned by years and tone. She had neither. She moved to bed too. Vasopressor dripped steady. She double-checked the pump, fingers light on the buttons. The tubing was routed poorly, looped where it could snag if someone rushed the bed. She corrected it without comment. Across the unit, a charge nurse laughed softly at something on her phone. The sound felt out of place, too normal. The junior nurse glanced toward the doors. They were reinforced but old, badge access supplemented by security presence during visiting hours. Tonight, visiting hours had stretched under pressure from administration, compassion directives, public sensitivity, policy bent. Physics did not. She repositioned a portable screen closer to the entry corridor, not enough to block movement, enough to narrow it. A doctor noticed and frowned. "Don't clutter the approach. I'll move it back," the junior nurse said. She did not move it back. At 1:14, a patient alarm chirped and stopped. She was already there. Adjusted the lead, reassured the patient with a hand on the shoulder. Her voice was low, neutral, not soothing. Grounding. "Still with us," she said. The patient nodded weakly. At the nurse's station, the senior nurse glanced up. "You're quick tonight." "Yes." The junior nurse replied. It was not praise. It was observation, filed and forgotten. She returned to charting. Her eyes flicked between screens and reflections in the glass. She tracked motion without staring, counted staff, counted exits, counted how many people would be in the unit if the doors opened suddenly. Too many. The elevator chime sounded down the hall. Once, twice. She paused her typing. Elevators at this hour were usually staff or transport. These were heavier, multiple bodies shifting, voices rising before doors even opened. She finished the sentence she was charting. Saved. Closed the record. At the station, someone groaned. "Again?" Security radio crackled faintly somewhere beyond the unit. The junior nurse stood and adjusted her gloves. She tightened them once, then stopped. Retightening was wasted motion. A family group appeared at the end of the corridor, larger than policy allowed, not escorted, faces tense, phones out. Someone was already recording. The senior nurse stepped forward. "Visiting hours are, we know," one of the men said. "We're not here to visit. We're here to make sure something doesn't happen." The wording landed wrong. The junior nurse shifted position, not forward, not back. Sideways. She placed herself near bed 4's power junction, where a pulled cable would cascade alarms across half the unit. She rested a hand lightly on the rail. The resident whispered, "Should we call security?" The charge nurse hesitated. "Let me talk to them first." The junior nurse did not look at her. She looked at the group's spacing instead. Who stood where? Who hung back? Who watched the staff instead of the beds? One woman near the rear scanned exits. The way staff did. That mattered. "Sir," the charge nurse said, forcing calm, "you'll need to step back." The man laughed. Others joined in. Not humor. Permission. The junior nurse spoke for the first time. "Lower your voices," she said. Not loud, not sharp. It cut through the sound anyway. The charge nurse turned, surprised. "I've got this." "Yes," the junior nurse replied. She did not move away. The man at the front looked at her. "Who are you?" She met his eyes. Neutral. Unprovocative. "Someone who needs this unit quiet," she said. He stepped forward. The space tightened. The junior nurse raised one hand, not in warning, not in threat. A signal. The respiratory therapist, without thinking, paused mid-step. A nursing assistant stopped pushing a cart, the unit stilled by degrees. The junior nurse spoke again, voice even. "If you cross this line," she said, tapping the floor with her shoe, "machines alarm. Patients destabilize, everyone sees you do it." The man hesitated. That hesitation mattered more than compliance. Behind her, the charge nurse whispered, "What are you doing?" "Buying time," the junior nurse said quietly. She did not explain further. Security finally appeared at the corridor entrance. 2 guards, both already tired. The junior nurse exhaled slowly through her nose, not relief. Adjustment, this was still early. The group did not leave. They compressed instead, pressing closer to the threshold without crossing it. Testing, the junior nurse noted the shift and filed it away. She stepped half a pace forward, not into their space, into the decision. "Only 2 of you," she said, looking directly at the man who had spoken first. "Everyone else waits." "Who says?" he demanded. She did not answer. The charge nurse did. "Hospital policy," she said quickly, grateful for an anchor. The man scoffed but gestured. 2 people peeled off and entered. The rest stayed just outside, not dispersed, waiting. The junior nurse watched the doors close behind them. She noted how long they took to shut. Too slow. She turned back to her patients. The ICU resumed its hum, but the tone had shifted. Staff moved with eyes up now. Voices stayed low without being told. A shape had formed around the junior nurse. Not authority, not yet. Attention. She felt it and ignored it. She checked bed 11, adjusted a drip, corrected a charting error someone else had missed. She did not point it out. The night pressed closer, and somewhere beneath the controlled noise of the ICU, the junior nurse recognized the familiar tightening of a situation that would not resolve on its own. She had been low on the board before. That had never meant unprepared. The ICU settled back into its rhythm, but the rhythm was off, not enough to alarm anyone who wasn't listening for it, just enough to keep the junior nurse alert. She stood at the medication cart, rechecking dosages she already knew were correct. Her eyes kept drifting to the corridor beyond the doors. The family members who had been allowed inside were not behaving like visitors. They did not gravitate toward the patient's face. They did not ask questions about prognosis or medication. One of them never looked at the bed at all. He watched the staff. The junior nurse adjusted an 4% rate and spoke quietly to the bedside nurse. "Who approved the extra visitors?" The nurse shrugged. "Admin. They didn't want a scene. They already have one," the junior nurse said. The nurse gave a thin smile. "You worry too much." "Maybe, but worry was just pattern recognition with a bad reputation." Down the hall, the elevator chimed again, then again. Too close together. The doors opened with voices already raised, laughter spilling out before people did. More visitors. Not family this time. Friends, supporters, people with phones out and expressions set before they arrived. Security escorted them as far as the doors, then stopped. "ICU's full," one guard said weakly. "You'll have to wait, we're just here to see him," a woman replied. "We were told he was fine." The guard hesitated and looked toward the nurse's station. The junior nurse saw it happen from the corner of her eye, the moment when responsibility drifted, looking for somewhere else to land. She stepped closer to the station, still not inserting herself into the conversation. She pretended to review a chart while listening. "How many are there now?" she asked softly. The charge nurse glanced down the corridor, counted quickly. Miscounted. 6, 7. "It's 11, the junior nurse said. The charge nurse frowned. "That can't be right." The junior nurse did not argue. She pulled up the unit census on the screen instead. 11 visitors logged in the last 20 minutes. 3 names repeated with slight spelling variations. She tapped the screen once, twice, then angled it so the charge nurse could see. "That's odd," the charge nurse murmured. "Yes," the junior nurse said. The visitors clustered tighter near the doors, bodies angled inward now. One of them pressed a palm flat against the glass as if testing its give. The junior nurse watched high. Shoulders. Too relaxed. Not nervous. Expectant. "Security should thin that out," the charge nurse said, not quite convincing herself. Security is already thin, the junior nurse replied. A doctor passing behind them stopped. What's going on? Nothing, the charge nurse said automatically. The junior nurse met the doctor's eyes. Yet, the doctor hesitated, then looked down the hall again. I'll call administration. The junior nurse nodded. Administration would slow things down. Delay was not always bad, but it did not solve pressure. At bed 9, a patient began to desaturate. The junior nurse was there immediately, adjusting oxygen, checking airway positioning. Her hands were steady, movements economical. She spoke calmly, narrating just enough for the patient to follow her voice. Behind her, the visitors' voices rose again. Someone laughed. Someone else said, "They can't stop all of us. That line landed wrong." The junior nurse finished stabilizing the patient and stepped back. She wiped her hands and looked up at the clock. 1:37. The charge nurse approached her, voice lowered. "You think this is going somewhere bad?" "I think it already has," the junior nurse said. "We're just behind it." The charge nurse folded her arms. "You're reading a lot into—" "Visitor numbers don't spike like this without coordination," the junior nurse said. "Phones are out. They're filming entrances, and no one is asking medical questions." Silence stretched between them. "What do you suggest?" the charge nurse asked. The junior nurse paused. She chose her words carefully. "Limit access points," she said. "Move non-essential staff out of the unit, quietly, and stop letting admin decide." "Security posture." The charge nurse exhaled sharply. "That's not your call." "No," the junior nurse agreed. "It's yours." The charge nurse studied her for a long moment. Then she turned and picked up the phone. The junior nurse did not wait to see what she said. She walked to the supply closet and repositioned 2 rolling carts closer to the doors, not blocking them, just narrowing the approach. She dimmed the lights 1 more degree. She pulled privacy curtains halfway on beds nearest the entrance, creating visual barriers without fully isolating patients. Small changes. The visitors noticed. One of them leaned closer to the glass, peering inside. Another lifted his phone higher. The junior nurse met his gaze through the glass and held it. No challenge, no fear, just awareness. The man looked away first. The intercom chimed softly, then cut out before any announcement came through. Somewhere in the hospital, something had failed to connect. The junior nurse felt the window narrowing. This was no longer about visitors. It was about mass, intent, and timing, and whatever was coming next would not ask who was senior enough to handle it. The first impact was not loud. It was a dull, collective pressure, bodies leaning in at once, testing the doors with weight rather than force. The glass bowed inward just enough to be seen. Someone gasped. A monitor alarm spiked in response to the sudden sound. The junior nurse looked up from a chart she had already memorized. "Close the curtains," she said quietly. A nursing assistant obeyed without thinking, pulling fabric across beds closest to the corridor. The ICU narrowed, became inward-facing. Patients faded into protected pockets of Dow. The charge nurse stepped forward. Everyone needs to step back from the doors. No one did. Outside, voices overlapped now, louder, less controlled. A man slapped the glass with his palm. Not hard, repetitive, testing. Security's radio crackled again, tinny and uncertain. "We're requesting backup," a guard said, voice strained. "We've got a crowd forming." Forming was the wrong word. The junior nurse moved to the side of the doorway, out of the direct line of sight. She checked the hinges. Old, reinforced, but not designed for sustained pressure. She felt the shift before it happened. The crowd surged, not as one, but in waves. Someone shouted. Someone else pushed. The glass shuddered. A seam at the top frame gave way with a sharp crack. The doors burst inward. Not all the way. Enough. The ICU flooded with sound first, shouting, boots, the scrape of metal against tile. Then bodies poured through the gap, momentum carrying them past the threshold. Staff froze. A doctor backed into a medication cart, knocking syringes to the floor. A nurse cried out as someone brushed past her, phone inches from her face. "Get out of the way!" someone yelled. The junior nurse stepped forward. She did not raise her voice. "Stop," she said. It was not a command meant for the crowd. It was for the room. 2 nurses halted mid-motion. A respiratory therapist stopped reaching for a valve. The unit caught on her stillness the way it always did. The mob did not stop. They spread out instead, filling space, fanning toward beds. One man pointed toward a curtained area. He's in there. The junior nurse moved laterally, placing herself between the pointing hand and the curtain. She did not touch him. You don't know where you are, she said. The man laughed. I know exactly where I am. You're wrong, she replied. Someone shoved past her shoulder. She absorbed the impact, adjusted her footing, and kept her balance. No reaction beyond that. Security! The charge nurse shouted. The guards were already inside, overwhelmed by numbers. One tried to form a line. Another raised his hands, palms out, speaking quickly. No one listened. A patient monitor began to alarm, heart rate climbing, oxygen dropping. The sound cut through the chaos. The junior nurse turned her head slightly. Bed 9, she said. A nurse broke from the frozen cluster and ran to it. The junior nurse looked back at the crowd. She raised her voice just enough to carry. If you move any closer, she said, someone dies. The words were simple, factual. The man nearest her hesitated, not because he believed her, because he understood consequence. Another voice shouted from behind him, They're bluffing! The junior nurse did not respond. She knelt instead, right there on the floor, and adjusted a cable that had been kicked loose. The alarm quieted. The room noticed. She stood again. You came here angry, she said. Anger makes you loud. Loud gets recorded. Recorded gets prosecuted. Phones wavered, a few lowered. Not all. This unit is not your stage, she continued. You want answers, you wait. You want control, you leave. A man lunged forward. Security grabbed him barely. The line broke. The junior nurse moved, 2 steps, precise. She closed a privacy curtain with one hand while guiding a nurse back with the other. She created space where there was none. Left, she said softly to a doctor. Now, he moved. A woman near the back of the crowd spoke up. They can't tell us what to do. The junior nurse looked at her, really looked. You're right, she said. I can't. She turned to the charge nurse. Lock the secondary doors. The charge nurse stared at her. We can't. Now, the junior nurse said. The charge nurse moved. Metal shutters slid down over secondary access points, sealing off side corridors. The ICU became a single, contained space. The crowd realized it at the same time. Noise spiked. Someone kicked a cart. Someone else shouted a name. The junior nurse stood in the center of it, shoulders squared, breathing steady. This was no longer a visitor problem. This was a containment problem, and the first line had already been crossed. The ICU had changed shape. What had been a place of flow, staff moving bed to bed, machines cycling quietly, had collapsed inward. Space was now contested. Every step carried weight. The junior nurse stood where 2 corridors met, not by accident. From there she could see most of the unit without turning her head. She did not block anyone's path. She made herself unavoidable. The charge nurse approached her, voice tight. You can't give orders like that. The junior nurse did not look at her. Her eyes tracked a man edging closer to a ventilated patient. I didn't, she said. I gave a warning. Another alarm chirped. Short, sharp, respiratory, the junior nurse said quietly. The therapist was already moving. The mob pressed again, emboldened by noise and numbers. Someone shouted a patient's name. Another voice answered from deeper in the crowd. They were coordinating now, even if they did not know it. The junior nurse lifted her voice. E. Not loud, but placed. All staff, she said. Switch to code response spacing. A few people hesitated. Then someone did it. Stepped back from the beds, cleared hands, created lanes. The ICU shifted with them. What code? A nurse whispered. The junior nurse did not answer. A man pushed past security and grabbed a bed rail. The patient inside stirred, heart rate spiking on the monitor. The junior nurse crossed the distance in 3 steps. She placed her hand over his, firm but controlled. Let go, she said. Don't touch me, he snapped. She did not release the rail. You're destabilizing him, she said. That will kill him faster than anything you think we're hiding. Her tone was clinical, unemotional. The man's grip loosened. Not out of fear, out of doubt, she took her hand away. The charge nurse stared at her now, something between anger and relief in her expression. Security is overwhelmed. I know, the junior nurse said. She turned to the nearest guard. How many exits are unsecured? The guard blinked. 2, maybe 3. Seal 1, she said. Leave 1 visible. Who are you to? Do it, she said quietly. The guard hesitated, then spoke into his radio. The mob noticed the shift. Someone shouted, They're locking us in. They're controlling flow. the junior nurse said, correcting him without raising her voice. "There's a difference." A bottle clattered to the floor and rolled, stopping near her foot. She nudged it aside without looking down. The ICU felt like it was holding its breath. The junior nurse moved to the nurse's station and pulled up the unit map. She spoke without turning. "Move critical patients deeper," she said. "Non-critical toward the far wall. Clear the center." "That's not protocol," a doctor protested. "It is for fire," she replied. "This is the same math." The doctor opened his mouth, then closed it. He started moving beds. The first real order had landed, not shouted, not declared, executed. The mob surged again, anger rising as momentum failed. A man swung at a guard and missed. The guard stumbled. The line broke further. The junior nurse stepped into the gap. She raised both hands. "Not surrender, not threat. Everyone stop," she said. The room did not stop. She lowered her hands. "Fine," she said softly. She turned to the charge nurse. "Call a unit-wide medical emergency." The charge nurse stared. "That will bring—" "Exactly," the junior nurse said. The charge nurse made the call. Alarms changed tone. Overhead lights brightened slightly. Doors down the hall opened as staff from adjacent units responded, filling space with purpose. The mob hesitated again, suddenly outnumbered by calm. The junior nurse watched them, reading faces, measuring resolve. This was the first real test, and it had cost her something. Every order she gave narrowed the space she could retreat into later. She knew that. She gave them anyway. The ICU did not calm, it organized. Staff moved with intent now, not panic. Beds rolled in controlled arcs, lines were secured, alarms were silenced as quickly as they sounded. The space began to obey rules again, even as the threat remained inside it. The junior nurse stood near the center, no longer blocking, no longer confronting. She directed flow with small movements, 2 fingers angled left, a brief nod, a quiet word dropped into the right ear at the right moment. She did not raise her voice. A nurse approached her, breathless. "They're asking who's in charge." The junior nurse shook her head once. "No one answers that. What do we tell them?" "Tell them patients are unstable," she said. "Which is true." The mob shifted again, frustration building as access narrowed. They were used to escalation yielding results. Here, escalation produced resistance without confrontation. A man near the front pointed at the junior nurse. "She keeps talking like she runs this place." The junior nurse met his eyes. "I'm keeping people alive," she said. "You're in the way." He opened his mouth to shout back. She did not wait. "Bed 3, she said, turning away. "Pressure's dropping." A doctor and nurse moved instantly, drawn by urgency that was real. The man's protest dissolved into background noise. The junior nurse had learned long ago that authority did not need acknowledgement to function. It only needed momentum. Security regrouped along the wall she had left visible. She had instructed them to hold position, not advance. Containment over control. A guard whispered to her as she passed. "Police are en route. How long?" she asked. "Unknown." She nodded once. Unknown was a variable, not a problem. She paused near the medication room and glanced inside. "Supplies intact, no breaches." She closed the door and slid a cart in front of it, just enough to slow access without drawing attention. A scream cut through the unit. Not anger. Fear. A patient had woken, disoriented by the noise. Tubes tugged. Heart rate spiked. The junior nurse was there before anyone called her. She took the patient's hand, steady and firm. "Stay with me," she said. "Don't fight the machine, the pied." Tion's breathing slowed, matching her cadence. Behind her, a man scoffed. "Look at her, playing hero." She did not react. She adjusted sedation. The monitor steadied. That moment, quiet competence under scrutiny, shifted the room again. Staff drew closer to her orbit. Even some in the mob watched, uncertain now where to direct their anger. The junior nurse straightened and addressed the charge nurse in a low voice. "They'll try something soon. Pressure always does." "What kind of something?" the charge nurse asked. "Whatever forces us to choose," the junior nurse said, as if summoned by the words. A man near the back shoved a nurse aide hard enough to send her stumbling into a bed rail. The aide cried out, more in shock than pain. The unit snapped taut. Security surged forward instinctively. The junior nurse lifted one hand. They stopped. She stepped between the guard and the man who had shoved the aide. She did not square off. She angled her body slightly, reducing threat without retreating. "Step back," she said. The man's chest heaved. "She touched me first." She didn't, the junior nurse said. I saw it. You calling me a liar? I'm calling you done, she replied. Something in her tone, flat, final, landed harder than shouting would have. The man hesitated, looked around, realized eyes were on him now. He stepped back. Security moved in and guided him away, not roughly but decisively. The cost registered immediately. The mob's anger refocused, not on staff as a group, but on her. She felt it like heat. The charge nurse leaned in. You're making yourself a target. Yes, the junior nurse said. That's intentional. She had taken the pressure onto herself, away from patients and staff. It was a familiar calculation. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. She did not check it. She already knew who it would be. This was no longer about reclaiming space. It was about holding it long enough for something else to arrive. And holding always cost more than taking. The unit strained under its own restraint. The mob had stopped advancing, but they had not stopped thinking. Voices lowered. Phones came back up, steadier now. Someone began narrating quietly, framing the scene for an audience not present. The junior nurse noticed immediately. Lights down 2%, she said to no one in particular. A tech adjusted the controls. The unit softened, shadows deepening, faces blurred on camera, details faded. The junior nurse moved again, slow and deliberate, checking patients as if nothing else existed. She lingered just long enough at each bed to remind the room what was at stake. A man near the entrance scoffed. She thinks she's in charge. She thinks she's better than us, another added. The junior nurse heard them. She let the words pass through her. A monitor alarm sounded, different this time, not sharp. Sustained. Bed 6. A trauma patient, unstable since arrival, began to crash, blood pressure falling, heart rhythm irregular. The junior nurse was there instantly, hands moving with practiced economy. She assessed without speaking, then looked up. I need space, she said. No one moved. She raised her voice slightly. Now, staff surged in. The mob did not retreat. The junior nurse made a decision. Security, she said, clear 5 feet. The guards hesitated. We can't. You can, she said, and you will. They moved, forming a narrow perimeter. Not enough. But something. The patient's pressure dropped further. The junior nurse started interventions, calling out numbers, doses, steps. Her voice was calm, unbroken. Someone in the mob shouted, That's him! That's the one! The junior nurse froze for half a second, long enough to register the danger. The patient was not the target. The bed was the excuse. She leaned closer to the patient, shielding him with her body without making it obvious. She adjusted a line, then spoke quietly to the doctor beside her. They're going to rush, she said. When they do, pull back. The doctor swallowed. And you? I'll slow them, she replied. This was the fracture point. If violence happened here, it would not be contained. Patients would be harmed, staff would be hurt, the ICU would lose control entirely. The junior nurse straightened and turned to face the crowd. You don't want this, she said. A man laughed harshly. You don't get to decide what we want. No, she said. But I decide what happens if you take another step. What are you going to do? He challenged. Call more nurses? She did not answer. She reached into her pocket and removed her phone. She held it low, screen dark. If you rush this bed, she said, the person you care about dies. Not because of us, because of you. Someone shouted, she's threatening us. No, the junior nurse said. I'm describing cause and effect. The patient's monitor dipped again. The room seemed to tilt toward it. A woman near the back screamed, Move! Let them work! The mob fractured, voices arguing now. Fear bled into anger, then into confusion. The junior nurse felt the cost settle in her chest. Every second she stood there increased her exposure. Professionally, physically. She stayed anyway. Security's radios crackled louder now. New voices, short codes, direction. The junior nurse listened without looking. This was close, too close. She stepped back toward the bed, turning her back on the crowd deliberately. A calculated risk. It signaled confidence or disregard. The crowd hesitated, unsure how to respond to someone who refused to face them. The patient stabilized slightly. Enough! The junior nurse exhaled once. She had bought time, but time, like pressure, always demanded payment, and the bill was about to come due. The junior nurse felt the shift before anyone spoke it aloud. The noise in the unit had changed again, not louder, sharper, focused. The mob's attention had narrowed, drawn toward a single point, toward her. Security moved closer now, forming a tighter ring. One of the guards leaned in, voice barely audible. Police are staged downstairs. They're waiting on authorization to move in force. The junior nurse nodded once. They can't come in hot. The guard frowned. They don't want to. They will if this turns violent, she said, and then patients get hurt. The guard hesitated. What do you suggest? She looked past him at the beds, at the lines, the machines, the bodies that could not move or choose. Delay, she said. At any cost. The guard swallowed. Whose? She did not answer. The mob surged again, not forward this time, but inward, voices converging, anger consolidating. Someone shouted her description. Someone else repeated it louder. That nurse, a man said. The one giving orders. Phones tilted toward her now, lenses steady. She felt the weight of them, the annals of recorded moments. The charge nurse appeared at her side, face pale. They're asking your name. Don't give it, the junior nurse said. They'll find it. Yes, she agreed. Later, a sudden crash echoed as a rolling cart was shoved aside. A guard stumbled, caught himself. The line thinned dangerously. The junior nurse stepped forward before anyone else could. She raised her voice, not in anger, not in command. Injured staff, she said clearly. Medical emergency. The words cut through instinctively. Even the mob paused, conditioned by years of hearing them. She turned to the charge nurse. Initiate full unit lockdown. The charge nurse stared. That will trap everyone, the junior nurse said, including me. Understanding flickered across the charge nurse's face. You'll be written up, investigated, fired. Yes, the junior nurse said, but they won't rush a sealed unit. The charge nurse hesitated only a moment longer. Then she moved. Metal barriers dropped from the ceiling at key points. Doors sealed with dull, final thuds. The ICU became a closed system. The mob erupted. Shouting turned frantic. Someone pounded on a barrier. Another screamed threats that echoed uselessly off reinforced surfaces. The junior nurse stood in full view, hands at her sides. You can't do this, someone yelled. I just did, she replied. A man lunged toward her before security could stop him. She shifted her weight and redirected him. Not a strike, not a throw, just enough to unbalance. He fell hard. The wind knocked from him. The room went still. She looked down at him. Stay there, she said. He did. Security swarmed, restraining him. The mob recoiled, shock rippling through them. The junior nurse felt the cost land fully now. This would not disappear. Reports would be written. Videos would circulate. Questions would be asked. She had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. Her phone vibrated again in her pocket. This time she answered it without looking. Yes, she said. A voice on the other end spoke quietly, efficiently. She listened, nodded once. They're cleared, she said, but move slow. She ended the call and slipped the phone away. The charge nurse watched her closely. Who was that? The junior nurse did not answer. She turned back to the unit, scanning beds, staff, barriers, everything held. For now, she had made the order. It had cost her position, her anonymity, her future here. She accepted that without regret, because the unit was still intact, and that was the only metric that mattered. The sound reached the ICU before the sight. Not sirens, not shouting, engines, heavy, coordinated, multiple vehicles coming to controlled stops outside the hospital, their idle a low vibration that carried through concrete and steel. It was not the chaos of a rushed response, it was measured. The mob felt it too. Voices faltered, phones lowered as attention pulled outward, instinctively tracking power when it arrived. Security radios came alive all at once. Units in position, perimeter secure, stand by. The junior nurse stood near the nurse's station, hands resting lightly on the counter. She did not move toward the doors. She did not prepare to greet anyone. She waited. A guard approached her, eyes wide now. They're asking for you. She did not react. By name, he added. She closed her eyes briefly, then opened them. Tell them. I'm here. Minutes passed. Long enough for tension to rebuild, then stall again. Then the ICU doors opened, not forced, not rushed. Authorized, a man entered first, not in a uniform most would recognize. Plain jacket, clean posture, eyes that missed nothing. He scanned the room once, cataloging damage, people, positions. He stopped when he saw her. He did not salute, he did not smile. He inclined his head slightly. Respect without display. Ma'am, he said. The word landed like a weight. The charge nurse stiffened. Several staff members exchanged looks. The man continued, voice calm and clear. "We're ready when you are." The mob reacted instantly. Outrage, confusion, fear crashing together. "What is this?" someone shouted. "Who does she think she is?" The junior nurse stepped forward at last. "Not here," she said quietly to the man. "Containment first." He nodded once, turned, issued short instructions into his radio. No raised voice, no explanation. Uniformed personnel moved in behind him, disciplined, controlled, unmistakably different from local response. They did not brandish weapons. They positioned themselves with deliberate geometry, cutting off movement, separating the mob without force. The mob tried to argue, to posture. It failed. One by one they were guided out, restrained only when they resisted. No spectacle, no retaliation, just inevitability. The junior nurse watched until the last one was gone. Only then did she exhale. The man returned to her side, lowered his voice. "You held longer than projected. I didn't have a choice," she replied. "You always do," he said. "You chose right." The charge nurse approached, unable to contain herself. "Who is she?" "The—" Man glanced at the junior nurse. She shook her head once. "That's not relevant," he said instead. "Police supervisors arrived next, deferential without quite knowing why. Reports were requested, statements offered." The junior nurse stepped back. "I'll give mine later," she said. "My patients come first." No one argued. She moved through the ICU one last time, checking vitals, speaking quietly to staff, resetting the unit to something resembling normal. Her presence steadied everyone she passed. When she was done, she removed her gloves and dropped them in the bin. The man waited by the exit. "They'll ask questions," he said. "Yes," she replied. "Your cover won't hold after tonight. I know." He studied her for a moment. "Do you want extraction?" She shook her head. "Not yet." He nodded. "Understood." They walked out together, briefly visible to the hallway cameras. By morning, people would talk. Stories would spread. Details would blur. But no official explanation would ever be given. Authority, revealed only to those who already understood it. The ICU sounded different after the doors closed behind the last uniform. Not quieter, just thinner. The layered noise of conflict had peeled away, leaving the steady mechanics of care exposed again. Ventilators breathed. Pumps clicked. Monitors traced their lines with indifferent consistency. Life continuing. The junior nurse moved through the unit without urgency now. She did not rush because nothing was chasing them anymore. She did not slow because damage still needed to be measured. She checked bed 6 first. Blood pressure holding, rhythm stable, skin warm. The patient's chest rose and fell in time with the ventilator. She adjusted a blanket that had been kicked loose during the chaos, tucked it carefully. No one else noticed the gesture. At bed 9, the nurse who had been shoved earlier sat on a stool, hands wrapped around a paper cup. Her eyes were unfocused. "You're clear," the junior nurse said softly. "Go sit in the break room for 10 minutes. "I'm fine," the nurse replied automatically. "You're not," the junior nurse said, "and that's allowed." The nurse hesitated, then stood. "Thank you." The junior nurse nodded once and moved on. The charge nurse stood at the nurse's station, staring at the incident report screen, as if it might change if she looked long enough. Her shoulders were rigid now, holding up a weight that had finally settled. "They want statements," she said without turning. "Administration. Legal. Everyone." "Yes," the junior nurse replied. The charge nurse finally faced her. "They're asking who authorized the lockdown." "I did," the junior nurse said. The charge nurse exhaled sharply. "You know what that means?" "Yes." A pause. "You saved this unit," the charge nurse said. It was not gratitude, it was fact. The junior nurse met her eyes. The unit saved itself. "That's not true." The junior nurse did not argue. She had learned when not to. A police lieutenant appeared briefly at the station, clipboard in hand. He glanced at the junior nurse, recognition flickering, then looked away again. "We'll circle back," he said. "No rush." The junior nurse nodded. "Understood." She continued her rounds. Some staff avoided her eyes now, unsure how to place her. Others watched her closely, replaying moments in their heads, connecting details that had not mattered before. She ignored all of it. At the far end of the unit, she paused by the window. Dawn had begun to thin the night, turning black glass into dark blue. The city beyond was unaware of how close it had come to spilling inward. Her phone vibrated. A message this time, not a call. "Good work." Debrief later. She did not reply. She slid the phone back into her pocket and leaned her forehead briefly against the cool glass. Not exhaustion. Release. Behind her, a doctor cleared his throat. "They're saying you might be suspended." "Yes," she said. "For what it's worth," he added. "I followed every order you gave. I'd do it again." She turned to face him. "So would I." He nodded and walked away. The junior nurse returned to the station and began finishing charts that were not hers. Errors introduced by stress, missing timestamps, incomplete notes. She corrected them quietly. By the time morning staff began to arrive, the ICU looked almost normal. Almost. Only the cracked door frame and scuffed floor hinted at what had happened. The junior nurse removed her badge and set it on the counter, not in resignation, in readiness, because aftermath was not the end. It was the accounting. Morning arrived without ceremony. Day shift filtered in carrying coffee, folded newspapers, quiet complaints about traffic. The ICU accepted them the way it always did, without explanation. Machines did not care who worked nights or days. Patients did not ask what had happened while they slept. The junior nurse stood at the locker room sink, washing her hands longer than necessary. She watched the water run clear, watched it disappear down the drain. Her scrubs were clean, unmarked, no visible sign of the night. She pinned her badge back on and stepped into the unit. A few people looked up, some nodded, others looked away. No one stopped her. The charge nurse from the night shift lingered by the desk, jacket already on. She hesitated when she saw the junior nurse approach. "They want you upstairs at 9, she said quietly. "Administration. Legal." "Yes," the junior nurse replied. "A beat." "For what it's worth," the charge nurse added, "I wrote that you acted within medical necessity." The junior nurse met her eyes. "Thank you. It was enough." She took her assignment sheet from the printer. 2 patients, routine acuity, no commentary, no special notes, back on the roster. She began her rounds. At bed 2, she adjusted a line and spoke softly to the patient, who stirred and settled again. At bed 7, she caught a subtle rhythm change before the monitor flagged it and corrected the lead. Quiet competence. Unseen. A hospital administrator appeared briefly at the edge of the unit, flanked by someone from security. They scanned the space, noted the damage, and whispered to each other. Neither approached her. They did not know how. At 08:52, a convoy passed outside the hospital. Unmarked vehicles, moving smoothly through morning traffic. No sirens, no pause. No one inside the ICU noticed. At 08:59, the junior nurse finished charting and handed off her patients to the oncoming nurse. The report was concise, clinical, devoid of drama. "Anything else?" The oncoming nurse asked. "No," she said. "They were stable." She clocked out at 9:01. Upstairs, questions would be asked. Forms would be signed. Decisions would be made that pretended to be about policy and liability instead of fear. She accepted that. In the hallway, a young orderly looked at her with open curiosity. "You were here last night, right?" "Yes," she replied. He hesitated. "They say you handled it." She adjusted the strap of her bag. Everyone did their job. She walked past him before he could ask more. Outside, the air was cold and clean. Ordinary. The hospital loomed behind her, already closing around the story it would never fully tell. By the next shift, her name would be a rumor. By the next week, a footnote. By the next incident, forgotten entirely. She preferred it that way. Authority was not something she carried with her. It was something she set down when it was no longer needed. She crossed the parking lot without looking back. Tomorrow night, if she was still on the schedule, she would return, low on the board,